I'm 79 years old, and there's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially in the quiet moments. Not the big mistakes people warn you about, not the dramatic failures or obvious regrets. The smaller ones. The ones that don't feel dangerous at the time. The ones that slowly shape your life while you're busy looking somewhere else. For most of my life, I believed I was doing things the right way. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't irresponsible. I followed the rules. I showed up. I worked hard. I kept my head down. And for a long time, that felt like enough. When you're younger, you assume that if you're not actively ruining your life, you must be building a good one. That's a comforting thought. It's also wrong. I didn't ruin my life. I just slowly gave pieces of it away without noticing. It happened in ordinary moments, moments that didn't feel important enough to stop and question. Like the nights I stayed late at work even when nothing urgent was happening. Like the weekends I told myself I needed to catch up instead of resting. Like the conversations I half listened to because my mind was already on the next thing. None of those moments felt like mistakes. They felt responsible. They felt mature. They felt like what adults were supposed to do.
I remember being in my early 40s, sitting at the kitchen table late at night with paperwork spread out in front of me. The house was quiet. Everyone else was asleep. And I remember feeling proud. Proud that I was providing. Proud that I was dependable. Proud that I was sacrificing. What I didn't realize was that I was also disappearing from my own life. Very slowly. So slowly that I didn't notice. You don't feel the weight of years while you're carrying them one day at a time. That only comes later. Much later. For me, it came the first time I realized my children no longer needed me the way they once did. Not because they were ungrateful, but because I had trained them to live without me. I wasn't absent in the obvious way. I was there, technically, but I wasn't present. And children notice that long before parents do. They stop asking. They stop waiting. They adjust. And you tell yourself that's a good thing, that it means you raised them well. But deep down, something feels off. At the time, I brushed that feeling aside. There was always something more pressing, another responsibility, another obligation, another reason to postpone reflection. That's the dangerous part. Life rarely forces you to stop. You have to choose to. And most of us don't. Because stopping feels irresponsible. It feels selfish. It feels like falling behind. So we keep going. I kept going until one afternoon when I found myself sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, unable to remember what I'd come in for. Not because I was forgetful, because my mind was exhausted. I sat there longer than I should have, just staring at the steering wheel. And for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that unsettled me. If this is what my days feel like now, what will they feel like later? That question stayed with me. Not loudly, quietly. It followed me through the years, through birthdays, through holidays, through milestones that passed faster than I expected. Time doesn't speed up. Your perception of it changes. The years don't move faster. You do. One day you're planning your life, the next, you're remembering it, and the transition happens without warning. I used to believe that fulfillment was something you arrived at, that if you worked hard enough and stayed disciplined long enough, life would eventually open up, that you'd reach a point where you could finally exhale. That point never came. Every time I got close, something else replaced it. Another goal, another expectation, another version of just a little longer. I told myself I was being patient. What I was really doing was delaying my own life. I didn't notice the cost at first. The cost shows up later, in the form of distance. Distance from people you love. Distance from parts of yourself you once enjoyed. Distance from the present moment. You don't wake up one day and feel regret. You wake up one day and feel unfamiliar with your own life. That's harder to explain and harder to accept.
I remember the first time I realized I didn't know what my wife was thinking anymore. Not because she stopped sharing, but because I stopped asking. Our conversations had become logistical, efficient, predictable. We were good partners, but somewhere along the way, we stopped being curious about each other. And curiosity is the quiet foundation of connection. Without it, relationships don't explode. They fade, slowly, politely, until one day you realize you've been living beside someone instead of with them. That realization doesn't come with drama, it comes with silence. And silence can be louder than conflict. There are things I wish I had understood earlier. Not rules, not strategies, just truths. Like the fact that no one remembers how busy you were, they remember how you made them feel. They remember whether you were present. They remember whether you noticed them. The moments that stay with people aren't the impressive ones. They're the ordinary ones, where you chose attention over distraction. I've learned that the hard way. I've attended funerals where people spoke about kindness, patience, presence. Not productivity, not ambition, not titles. And every time I felt a familiar weight settle in my chest. Not because I failed, but because I recognized what I had overlooked. We spend so much of our lives trying to be useful that we forget to be human. Useful feels safe. Human feels risky. Human requires slowing down. It requires listening without fixing. It requires staying when it would be easier to move on. I avoided that for years, not intentionally, but consistently. And consistency shapes outcomes more than intention ever will. If I could speak to my younger self, I wouldn't tell him to quit his job or abandon responsibility. I would tell him to pay closer attention to the small decisions, the ones that seem harmless, the ones that quietly repeat. Because those are the decisions that become your life. I would tell him that rest is not a reward, it's a requirement. That presence is not optional, it's essential. That relationships don't survive on good intentions, they survive on attention. And attention is something you have to choose again and again. I would tell him that someday is not a place you arrive at. It's a story you tell yourself to avoid discomfort, and that the cost of avoidance is always higher than it appears. I'm not unhappy now, but I am aware. Aware of how quickly the years passed. Aware of how many moments I assumed would repeat themselves. Aware of how fragile later really is. That awareness is a gift, but it's one I wish I had received earlier. If you're listening to this and thinking it doesn't apply to you yet, I understand. I thought the same thing. Most people do. Until one day, they don't. Life doesn't announce when it shifts from abundance to limitation. It just does, quietly. And by the time you notice, something has already changed. So if there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's not fear, it's attention. Pay attention to your days. Pay attention to the people in front of you. Pay attention to the moments that feel small. Because they're not. They're everything. If this made you pause, share it with someone you care about. Leave a comment and tell me one thing you don't want to keep postponing. And subscribe to The Last Lesson. Some lessons don't come with urgency. They come with time. And time is the one thing none of us ever get more of.